The power and history of fate. So first, let's discuss what is fate. Fate or destiny is the idea or the belief that people were created to serve a purpose or to have a goal in life that's predetermined. Or, just in general, that all events or all things are predetermined, sent down by some omnipotent being, and everything has been planned out from the very beginning of the universe to the very end of it. Everything has an answer. Of course, there isn't just fate and no fate, there is gray areas everywhere in between, from perhaps only the end goal is predetermined, but everything along the way has variations in how it could go, but we'll get into those in a little bit. First, let's talk about the man with no plans, Cicero. Cicero was not the first philosopher on fate, but he was close. He did not believe in hard determinism or the idea that everything has a determined ending, beginning, middle, every part. Uh, he believed that there was no plan for us all, so to say, and that everyone was free to make their own decisions, no matter how good or bad they may be. Cicero lived in the Roman Empire, and his ideas were very prominent throughout, up until, of course, the Roman Empire's collapse. So, until then, Cicero's teachings stuck around great. They were many of the royal people's ideals, and the poor people who couldn't learn how to read or write, of course, didn't really have a say in it either way. Now, that did all change once the empire fell. The barbarians came and crushed the Roman Empire. It shattered into chaos, and for a few hundred years, there wasn't really a whole lot going on in the world of fate. Until the church came into the picture. Now, the church, as we all know, of course, I'm speaking only of Western society right now, was the main driving force for Western society in general. You were raised by it, and therefore you were raised into the idea of determinism fate. The idea that the omnipotent God, with a capital G, is always there and has planned out your entire life from birth to death, and you had a purpose. If you chose not to believe in this for some reason, or perhaps you came from a distant land and weren't quite used to the ideals of fate, you were generally pressured into this anyway just because of how massive of an influence the church had on modern society, especially the less fortunate society, the poors, the peasants, those who couldn't quite read. All they had was the church teachings to give them purpose in life, really. And of course, if you chose to go against the church and you were not in the pocket of a king or really good standings with the church, you would probably be tortured and suffer an incredibly terrible fate, far worse than any of us would ever willingly undergo. So, what happened? How did we go from anti fate with Cicero to back fate and with the Western Church, and then back again to where we are now? Unfortunately, as much as I wish I could leave it there, it's not quite that simple. Today, most people do still believe in some amount of fate, and I can't blame them either. It's not hard to see how they chose to believe in fate, funnily enough. First, let's talk a little bit about Augustine of Hippo, the man who changed the world. Augustine of Hippo was a Catholic priest, I believe, and he was also a theologian who wrote on determinism, and his teachings were incredibly influential and shaped almost all of modern Christianity single-handedly. He wrote and believed that God allowed enough free will for someone to choose between good and evil, and that the ascension into heaven at the end was the reward for making the right choice, basically. There was still a form of fate and determinism because God sent you into the world and eventually would know how you died, but the journey along the way, you were allowed to choose between good or temptation and evil. This form of fate determinism has basically persevered throughout the entirety of medieval times and even into the modern day at quite a relevant amount. So, speaking of modern day, fate as part of our modern culture. We can see the ideas of fate and destiny clearly in today's society. It's everywhere. You can look at any video game, any book, any movie. There are countless, infinite amount of plots that revolve around main characters having the destiny or being prophesized or fated to do something absolutely incredible. As kids or even adults who idolize these characters, it can cause those people to want to believe that they themselves are fated to be great, fated or destined to do something just as incredible as these characters. So let's meet Alberto. Let's go to a modern example of how fate can work in our culture. But imagine if Alberto were destined to be the savior of mankind. Maybe he develops some incredible drug that cures a currently incurable disease, or a new energy source that saves us from greenhouse gases. Doesn't that kind of a story fill you with hope and inspiration and determination? It's hard not to see why people still choose to believe in fate. Now let's go to another example and meet Marcus. Maybe Marcus is destined to be the next tech billionaire, and that thought drives him through each of his days. This is one of the reasons we still have fate. One of life's biggest questions is, what is our purpose? These ideas of fate give us that needed identity and purpose in our life, and the drive and motivation that we need to get through. Now, let's meet you. That's right, you. You've probably thought about something you're destined for before. If you haven't, I want you to close your eyes, take a little bit of time, and try it right now. And if you can think of something, I would love it if you would leave it in the comments, and I would love to go through and see what all the different destinies we have in our classroom. So, let's say fate isn't real, but does it need to be? I personally don't think that it does. Humans are some of the most incredibly adaptable things on this planet. As long as you have a drive, you can do whatever your heart desires. You just need to find the motivation inside of yourself. And if you can't find it inside of yourself, which is understandable, it's incredibly difficult to do, just know that I believe in you. So does Marcus. Just look at it. Humanity's greatest ideals. One way we can realize and see how fate has persevered so far through humanity's history is that humanity holds very few things higher than success. This could be a reason why fate is still here and so loved. We hear countless real-world stories of billion-to-one odds that randomly happened. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the story before, but we are one. If you can imagine just how many random chance events had to come just one after another for us to even exist, from the beginning of the universe to our place in the universe to where the Earth is in the Goldilocks zone to us being born. It's such an insane occurrence that it's hard to not believe that we're destined to be here for a special reason. Let's go back to Alberto for a second. He's doing incredible now. He's one of the favorite boys on his team. And he thinks he's fated or destined to do that. But does he need fate to do that? I don't think so. And neither does Cicero. We both think that he would only have to believe in himself to do this, and that there is no overarching fate to control his goals scored in each game. So, why does any of this really matter? Well, if free will does exist, or rather, if free will doesn't exist, it doesn't matter, I suppose. You're predetermined to read this or watch this with me, and you're predetermined to do what you do after, and predetermined to what you ate for breakfast today, or if you even had breakfast. However, if free will doesn't exist, then perhaps I was able to inform you a little bit of things you otherwise wouldn't have known, and hopefully give you a little bit of motivation. And so I hope this helped. Thank you for watching, and I hope you go on to do something incredible, fate or not.